Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, oh boy, what a case. That was crazy. Okay.
And we're supposed to do what?
So, first off, let's go ahead and discuss the case facts. What did you guys think was some of the most important things that stuck out to you? And then what we're going to talk about what the issue is and why is it important? And then we'll kind of analyze from there. So did anything really like stick out to you guys while reading the case, besides the fact that the people died? Like,
Yeah. What I learned most about it, or what I took from it, was there's a culture, and NASA's culture was one of. I'm trying to work on my computer while we're doing this.
gotcha.
Was one of mission first. Whatever the mission was, that's what we're going to do. And as you did a lot of the reading, it was, how long did we get away with this? Well, we got away with it in the past. Let's go on with it. Let's see if we can do it again.
With those foam strikes, all those little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
None of them were disastrous, so they weren't worried about it.
Exactly. And so it was one of those, just kind of, the culture was, we've got a job to do. We're going to do the job. Even if somebody did raise a concern, a lot of times I think they didn't feel it was grounded, so they just pushed past it. So that's what I took from it, was the culture at NASA was one of mission first, and everything else kind of took a second or third place to it.
And one of the comments they made was, prove to me that this is wrong rather than prove to me that it's right.
Yes, so, exactly.
If they couldn't prove their point that there was trouble, even which also meant they couldn't prove that there was no trouble, that they had trouble in order for them to halt everything.
Yeah.
But any questions with that much money and lives at stake should definitely have been worth halting. Even though the whole world would have been disappointed, they're more disappointed now.
Yeah. I thought so I was thinking that it was a lot like in The Habit 2 and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where instead of focusing on, or was it Habit? Oh, I can't remember which habit it was now, but it was like they were focusing on the urgent, not the important.
Mm-hmm.
So they were focused more on making sure that they were getting faster turnover times, and that they were trying to get 60 missions per year or whatever, rather than making sure that the shuttle was continuously improving and that the people on the shuttle were safe. Because they were just kind of like, we don't have time to fix everything, so we're just gonna, whatever didn't work last time, we obviously need to adjust that, and we'll just let everything else kind of like just go by the wayside, rather than like, okay, this is what we like. They just needed more of a plan. I felt like that's what I felt like. So, what did you guys say was the root cause, the issue for your papers that you wrote?
They didn't give enough credit to the engineers. I'm rereading it really quick. They didn't. The ones who noticed the concerns and who said there's questions and they don't have enough information to declare that it was safe, because they had questions and because they showed that there was probable cause, I guess, but they couldn't prove that it was certain, just probable. So they weren't taking their concerns into consideration because they had a higher position. And they were looking more at the image of NASA and of, the impact of the public, I guess, opinion.
Yeah.
whether or not they were going to launch this time. They were worried that they'd already had 18 delays, so they just wanted to get it launched, and they didn't want somebody to step up and say, well, hey, wait, there's another thing. They're like, no more. So they weren't taking those concerns seriously enough because they were at a higher position level, so they weren't listening.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
How about you, Gary?
Like I said, I went back that it was like kind of like what you said, what we've kind of all said, is that it was more of, we got to get the job done. Job is more important than everything else. We got to get this launched. We've got, satellites up, and granted they did launch. Everything worked accordingly. One of the other things that I know, I did a little bit of research after this. Now what they do is they've got that big arm. They go ahead and they pick the arm, and they just, part of the thing is they look at all the little tiles underneath to make sure that they're not missing any, that if they're damaged or loose, they'll send a repair crew out to work on it. Just some simple things like that I think, granted, you don't know that you got a problem until you have the problem, but to me, it sounded like it'd been a little easy thing. One of the standard things that pilots do before they take off in an airplane is they do a walk around. They walk around the airplane just to make sure that everything is not falling, as nothing's fallen off or anything, kind of as a final check and as a responsibility for them to make sure that everything's going well. And I think that should have been carried on, because these guys are all Navy and Air Force pilots, that should be carried on, that somebody gets out and walks around this bird that's floating, hundreds of miles above the earth, just to make sure that everything's good to go before we go try to land it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and so that was just before they had launched. They had a completely different mindset than like Apollo 13 did. So when Apollo 13 had that issue.
There we go. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. Sorry. I was like, wait, what the? So that was like before they had. So Apollo 13, they had the issue with the air tank, and everyone was focused on finding a way to fix it. And they said it was a lot of like simple fixes that they had to do. And for this case, like in this case, the leadership was just like, well, it's too late now. And there was a really, really good quote that I loved. Hold on, let me see. Okay. So it's from Kranz, the flight director of Apollo 13. He says, once you think of surrendering, that is the path you go down. You have lost the mental sharpness that is going to take this survival situation and bring it to a successful conclusion. And I think that's what the team, like the leaders, did. They were just like, well, it's too late now. And so they didn't try and get images or anything. It was, so that was crazy for me. That was another issue that, yeah.
And even if they had done a rescue mission, I think because of their attitudes, they would always have thought maybe that wasn't really necessary. And they knew that. And so I think that's why they weren't really on board with, I guess, succumbing to the fact that because it's very likely they need to get into that mode where, I can't remember that quote you just said. Sorry.
Nope, the mental acuteness.
Yes. They weren't there. And they didn't want to, I think they didn't want to get there. They, I don't know if they weren't able or if they were just tired or they didn't have that adrenaline rush, that you get when, like let's say a car was coming your way, you would, you'd run faster than you've ever run before. They weren't doing that. They weren't allowing themselves to get into that mode. And I think that had they gone there, they wouldn't have ever, because they weren't feeling it, I don't think they ever would have believed it was necessary. Like I was reading about the possible, had they been rescued, if the next one had, could have left and got there in time, I guess, they would have had to walk with this long pole and it would have taken 2 days. And I thought they probably still would have been saying maybe this wasn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and they would have I'm sure they would have proved it later, but they weren't allowing themselves to be affected by the possibility of a disaster. Like they definitely had a wall up, so they weren't getting into that mode that they needed to be in.
No, seriously. I totally agree with that.
Which was very sad.
Yeah, really sad. Yeah, well, and like they were, yeah, I just keep thinking of all of the leaders were just like, well, it's too late. And like when they were going to go for the images, they're like, you haven't gone through the right channel, so you can't get it. Mm-hmm. And then there's one, so they're worried that, so they're like, all requests have to follow the proper channels.
Oh, I know.
Or else, because they were worried that unofficial requests could slip through the system and spin the community up about potential problems that have not been fully vetted through the proper channels.
Well,
that's weird. Gary says that he can see us, but we can't see him.
I just saw that message.
That's really weird.
Yeah, our, I guess, start of the year employee training, they had the superintendent got up and was talking about eliminating that from our district, getting approval, and then having your supervisor get approval, and then having them get approval from the district office, and then having it.
Yeah.
And me and 2 other ladies in our department were looking at each other like, because we're not supposed to talk direct back and forth. We have to go up and down.
Oh, goodness.
And it was so, it gets so crazy. And I keep wanting them to come talk to whoever told our supervisors that they need to do that.
Yeah, seriously. Hi, Gary. We're glad you're back.
I'm literally watching you guys right now on it. It's the weirdest thing. I'm just going to walk away from that computer for tonight. It is not.
You're like, I'm done.
I'm done with you. I'm done with you.
One of them, I spent an entire month trying to get food. I gave a list. Here's things I noticed were low on. Please tell me your usage. And my supervisor said, send it to me, and I'll send it to the director, and she'll check with the supervisors in the kitchen. And I'm going, this is getting way ridiculous. It took me an entire month. And so one of them, I didn't understand how she worded her needs. She didn't answer me on the oranges, and so after all of that and all the information I gathered back and forth, I just went to her directly and said, so how many, I never saw in all these emails, how many oranges do you need next week? How many cases? She forwarded that to my supervisor to let her know that I didn't follow the proper channel.
Oh, gosh.
And it's like, so all I got was, could you please include me in these emails? And I thought, well, then it's going to take 2 more weeks. And so I never replied to her. That's way over.
Boy.
I thought.
Oh, boy.
Okay, so.
There is something about making sure that the protocol is not all. It's kind of like the letter of the law and the spirit of the law.
Because some people overdo it. Some people abuse that. I'm fine with copying them on all my emails. I don't, rather than going. But it's something that big, though, they shouldn't have to ask their supervisor if they can pass it along if the supervisor's not listening.
Yep.
So one of the things I have on my desk in my office, a saying from a flight shuttle commander that's flown a bazillion missions. He says one of the quickest ways to get yourself killed in a space flight is not to follow procedures.
Yeah.
The second most common way to get yourself killed is to follow procedures. So it's one of those things that it's so true. Yeah. It is so true. So one of the things that I had, and as I was reading this and studying it, I just, my heart went out for these people that, the loss of their life and everything else. But it is still more dangerous for those astronauts and those people who are on that to drive back and forth to work than it is for them to go up and go flying. So the way I look at it is they knew the risk. They were willing to take the risk. There has really only been the 3 major accidents where they've had a loss of life. One of the Mercury's missions, the Discovery mission, and then the Challenger mission, where they've lost lives. You don't get that same in a car. Riding a bus back and forth is even more dangerous. So, or we can look at this as a Monday morning quarterbacks. I still think it's more safer than an airplane, and airplanes are incredibly safe. So,
but when when there's an accident, they always try to find out what or whose fault it is, if there is fault. But
yeah, I think that's a good point, though, Gary. That everyone was willing to take the risks,
right? But
I don't know. I think you talked about the NASA culture, and I think that was a huge issue. I wonder, and I mean, we will never know what could have happened, but I do wonder that if they had tried to get the images, they would have been like, "Oh shoot, that's crazy big. We should
first is make sure those images were improved."
Yeah,
that's a very
if it's gonna save a life, doesn't matter how much the image costs. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or if the news gets a hold of it, like. So I think they just had their priorities in a different. Understand why they do, because they are in a time crunch. They're in a pay crunch. They don't have enough funds, and they're also in they have to have specific designs for that shuttle because of the Department of Defense. So they have the triangle. All 3 sides are constricting on them, and so they can't. They have to. Something has to give, and I can see why that gave. But I think if they had their end goal in mind, they would have let something else give instead.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
Man. Okay.
So yeah, this was a hard one. Studying and working on this one was a hard one. It was not an easy. Next week, I don't know if you guys looked ahead, but next week doesn't look any. Well, for me, it's it looks spooky too, or not spooky, just another kind of conflicting one where we're gonna have to read it, study it, and really kind of look at all sides of this and not. The other ones have been pretty cut and dried. This one was a hard one because, like I said, I kept thinking, look how many shuttle missions we've had. Look truly how safe they are. We've really only had 3 major accidents where we've had a loss of life. So, but let's just make sure that we learn from this and try. And you kind of look at it. You can kind of, and I kept going back to the Discovery, to Discovery and the Challenger, and playing those 2 back and forth. And I can really see that it's one of those. We got away with it last time. I think we can get away with it this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to do that. I was a gunsmith, and I used to do that all the time. Yeah, he'll be able to take this out and go shooting and do some, go hunting with it and probably be able to carry it for, a whole bunch. But eventually this part's going to wear out and he's going to miss a shot. And I hope he's on the range just sighting it in and not trying to shoot a deer or something. But it's how far do you think you can get away with it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that kind of goes along with the biases that we have in human life. The first one that they kind of talk about is the human cognitive bias, and how does it apply to this case? So systematic errors in judgment, confirmation bias, or making our tendency to look for information that confirms our existing views, and then the sunk cost bias. where they're like, we've already spent all this money, we can't stop. But sunk cost is once you've spent it, you can't get it back. So don't even consider it in the rest of your decisions.
Exactly.
So, man, what of those biases did you guys notice? And I mean, we've kind of talked about it, but what would you specify as a cognitive bias?
Cognitive bias?
So the confirmation bias, where we tend to look for information that confirms our existing views, and then the systematic and cognitive bias, which is like the systematic errors in judgment.
That's where it all seemed to hang. They weren't making good judgments as far as they weren't doing enough to find out, like the photography for one, and their reasons weren't the right ones.
Yeah, so I would say that was definitely a cognitive error, or a cognitive bias.
Yep.
Because that could have alerted them to what, how bad the damage was. And I don't know what they would have done or thought they could have done at that point. But people are saying they could have launched a rescue mission. That could have brought another disaster on, who knows. But they probably would have done that.
Have you guys ever watched that movie Apollo 13?
Yes, love it.
So that kept rolling through my mind when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, okay, so let's say that they did go out on a spacewalk. They weren't scheduled, but they went on a spacewalk, and somebody just kind of looked down and went, "Oh my word, look at this!" And they reported back to NASA. Now we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
I have enough faith in these guys that they could have done something to mitigate that problem, or they could have started. I don't know. There could have been a lot of different things. Maybe the Russians could have shot up a rocket sooner to resupply their old thing, or somebody could have shot something up and thrown on an extra package of the
tiles,
of the tiles, and it would have everything would have been okay.
Yeah.
So that just kept going through my head.
Yep, I agree. That's true. They didn't even technically need to take a picture. If they could have had one of the astronauts just go on a spacewalk, just go look at the wing, because they had talked about trying to get one of them to do that, and then nothing ever came of that. So if they had done that,
they were trying to minimize fear the whole time.
Yeah, and like we said, I can see both points of view. Like, they were like, well, we'll be fine. It's been fine before, so why won't it be fine this time? And I think that's, once again, that could be the confirmation bias, where they don't look for information that would, like, counteract their existing view. They're like, that's fine. Look back on all the other cases, look at all of the information that we've gathered, and all of the different, like, run-throughs that they did, the analysis that they did. They're like, they'll be fine. And I think that that's very easy to do, even on smaller scale. Man. Sorry, go ahead.
Our son, one of our sons bought our, bless you.
Yeah.
One of our sons bought our charger almost 3 years ago. Like, before his mission, he's like, I'm buying that when I get home. And so he did. He was able to buy it. But we used to ask him, so are you getting the oil change? Oh, yeah. He kind of kept brushing it off. And then, I don't know, he drove it for a very long time. But then he drove it from Idaho to Seattle to visit another son. And he drove back. And it was about a month later, he was driving along and the car just started smoking and it just stopped. And he called us and he was on the road, and we got AAA out to pick him up. And we said, so it turned out that he had never gotten the oil changed.
Oh, goodness.
The whole first year that he had it. I don't even know how it kept going, except that Idaho, he didn't drive that far, but he did take that long trip to Seattle over Thanksgiving. And so we were like, what were you thinking? We kept telling you. He said, well, I just kept thinking, oh, I'll do it. We said, no, it's just as important as gas. You have to do it every, 3,000 to 5,000 miles. I mean, some people wait longer, but it's not a good idea. Well, I didn't know it would ruin the car. Like, he had to get a loan to buy a new motor.
Oh gosh.
Tearing the motor out. So now he has, the loans are small, but now he has 2 loans on that car. Like, they're both under 3,000 now, but still, each.
It's a good learning experience.
Oh yeah,
though.
no.
And at least no one died. So there's
Exactly. In this case, no one died.
Yeah.
Except an engine.
Oh yeah, he could have been in a worse situation because it just kind of sputtered and started smoking, and it just stopped. So he was really not. I don't. He was on an Idaho highway, but he could have been in traffic where everyone's going 80 or.
Yeah. Well, and I think I was like, I think an experience like that, and with the Columbia explosion, those are something that would really cause a paradigm shift, because you're like, it's fine. Mm-hmm. No, it's not fine. We need to adjust that.
Right.
Man. And I keep thinking about how, so for another real world application, I keep thinking about how making sure that we're focused on end goal, not just on how important, like on the urgent things in our lives right now. In my work, I work at a startup, and we're trying to get clients going, and we're trying to keep them as well. And right now we're just so busy, we don't have the manpower or the time to reach out to all of those people, but it's really important that we need to. And so we're like trying to find the balance between preparing, creating the plan and a program so that we don't have to reach out to everyone and call them. We can just email them or whatever, but still be reaching out to our customers. And it's a really hard balance to find, even in such a small thing. And it's it's obviously not life and death for anyone, but it's stressful for me to try and so how do I balance this out and make sure that I'm spending my time wisely and getting everything done as quickly as possible. So I feel for these NASA people, because they're just trying to, it's their job. They're just trying to do their job, and it affects lives if they do something wrong.
No, it does. That's why I would never want that job.
Yeah, same.
I have my degree, and I keep thinking, but I don't want to be a manager. I look at some of the managers and think, I don't want to have to decide who to listen to when there's 2 supervisors, at odds with each other, or differing opinions. It's hard enough just watching kind of drama like that.
Sorry, am I making you miss your coffee?
No, you're not.
Oh, right.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm not.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
No worries.
Oh, there we go.
I wouldn't want to be
My wife.
with all that responsibility, especially with space shuttle.
What happened, Gary?
Oh, my wife just got home from the PAC meeting, and I had locked the door on her accidentally, just force of habit. So I had to jump up and open the door for her. Sorry about that. But I thinking about back like a manager, this should have, like I said, I go back to when I was a firearms instructor in a previous job, and we told everybody when they were on the range shooting, everybody had the authority to stop shooting. If you saw something, if something happened, you just yelled ceasefire, and everybody was to stop instantly, regardless. And because it was a dangerous thing that we were doing. And sometimes people would stop because, a piece of cardboard had flown over and fell on somebody else's. And so it wasn't like anybody was going to be injured or anything like that, but it was just like, hey, let's clean up this trash real quick so that it's not distracting us, and different things like that. So, but I kind of think you need to have, or where there's a possibility of a loss of life or even a severe injury, there needs to be like like the old brakes on a train where somebody pulls it and the train brakes all lock up and everything stops.
Yeah.
And that's what you just do, is that there's got to be, where somebody can come back, a fail safe, where someone can come back and look at that and say, this happened last time and this was a big chunk that fell off and hit it, and we've seen other of these before. We got to stop this. We got to put up a shield, some type of a mechanical thing to stop the stuff from hitting it, or we just do away with it, or we do something.
Yeah.
And you had to come back. Yeah, it didn't do anything this time, and it didn't do anything before time. The 2 times that it hit it before. But then is that safe, or is that we're just getting lucky?
Yeah.
And I think that's what really needs to happen.
Have you guys ever seen World War Z?
Yes.
The movie.
I think I did.
It's a fairly. I mean, it's like 5 years old, probably 4.
Yeah.
But there's this the guy in Israel, the guy that had built the walls and everything.
Oh, yeah.
They were like, we Jewish people, we had made a decision that always there was going to be one man who, if everybody agreed, one man had to disagree and look at it another way. And that's what I kept thinking of. That's another thing I kept thinking of, is they needed one person, just one person that could have authority to be like, nope, this is an issue, and then work out everything in that way, and figure out what would happen if his thing happened, and then they would have that option to have something that they could do about it, which I think is kind of what the Tiger team in Apollo 13 did.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't have a Tiger team. They had the DDT or whatever. What was that one called? So
I can't
they didn't
remember,
have.
but
they didn't have that possibility, and I think you're right, Gary. I think it is important to have a failsafe.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
But it seems like this situation made it so that they could later on down the road say, "Oh no, we have to wait," and people will suddenly understand and not push anymore because of what happened.
Yep.
And if that didn't happen, they probably would still be taking shortcuts until it did. So,
yep.
Like when
it's that paradigm shift
blew up, or
Yep.
blow up, but when it smoked to death,
yep.
he suddenly listened, and now he listens to us. And
yeah, seriously.
Not on everything,
hey,
just on the card.
Yeah. That's right. Did you guys have anything else you kind of wanted to talk about from this case? Do you feel like we're missing anything? Gary, you said you looked into what happened after a little more. What did you find anything about that?
Right. So they did go through and with the foam, they now do. There's a couple of engineered. So as we were reading through there, it's most important to do an engineering control where it's taken out of the human hand. It happens automatically, or a machine does it for you, and if the machine's broken. So one of the things that they did was they redesigned the foam that was the problem in the first place, so that it wouldn't break apart, or if it did break apart, it would be moved into a different area. It wouldn't fall and hit the shuttle. That was so any type of debris falling wasn't going to hit the shuttle. Secondly, they put up cameras so that they could better watch the shuttle on takeoff to see if there was any type of issues with the takeoff. If we had like back to the Challenger, if the O-ring started to fail, well, then they could do an emergency eject, and the pilot and the crews can get out. Then the other thing is they also do take a look around from the ground, looking up with some pretty high-tech cameras to see if there's any issues with the bottom of the of it. They also kind of do some other maneuvers so that the thing is the shuttle's getting looked at all the way around so that these type of things don't happen in the future. So it makes sense. It's like, it's like a 5-second thing for that thing to do a loop in the atmosphere real quick. And, cameras can look at it from the Earth and go, yep, I don't see anything. And, 4 or 5 people look at it and say, yeah, we're all okay. Yep, we're good. All right, we're done. So simple things like that.
Crazy, but it makes sense. Like that is application for everyday life. It's the simple things that really make a difference. And I think, I don't know. I just keep coming back to that, keeping that end goal in mind, like that. That's what's gonna really help us in making sure that we have those fail safes, so we can be aware. We have that person that can be like, hey, what are you doing? That can really save us and help us have that paradigm shift. And mistakes happen, and it's important to keep moving on from them and not just like ignore them or wallow in them.
Right.
So, yeah.
And find solutions.
Yep. Find the solutions. Yep.
Oh.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else you feel like we need to talk about?
I'm good. Oh, just next week, I'm the facilitator, the leader of it, the lead on it. And I will check my computer a couple of times this week and make sure that I don't know what was with it. It was so weird. I'm sitting there talking to you guys going, hey, how's it going? Why aren't you guys, what? And then did we lose you? And I'm like, no, I can see both of you. You're both working. So I will make sure that my laptop's working. I don't know what happened with it, but I'll make sure that it's working. And then I'll have it. What time do we want to meet next week? Do we want to try to push it up, or do we have any issues to keep it 7:30, 8 o'clock? When works best?
I can do 6:30 next week.
Good for me.
Sorry, what?
Well,
Yes,
what did you say?
6 o'clock is good for me.
6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time.
Yeah.
Okay, 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Okay, that works best for me too.
Yeah, that works great for me. Thank you so much for being flexible tonight. Also, we did win our game, Gary. So,
yay!
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Is it basketball, volleyball?
Ultimate Frisbee.
Oh, okay.
And it was snowy. The grounds were snowy today, so it was kind of crazy. But we did it, so it was good. It was really fun.
Ooh, Idaho, and
outside sports. It's fun. It's real fun. You never know what's going to happen, but it was good. So
okay,
great, awesome. Well,
Alrighty.
thanks so much, guys. I'll post this, and it'll probably be later tonight that I post it, but I'll make sure to post this.
All right.
So that we can see it.
Alrighty.
Okay. Thanks so much. Yeah. Thanks.
Alrighty.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.